Hello.
How are you doing today? Oh, we're pumped.
It's been
You gotta
great so
stop
far.
saying, how are you doing? I'm hearing Joey every time.
How are you doing? That felt a little bit of inappropriate. My husband is right beside me.
I
and
know, right?
Okay, I get it.
I'm the husband.
Okay, so not how are you doing? Okay, got it. Check.
Oh. She's
So how
really
are things
present for this part
in-
of your discussion.
How are things in the Netherlands?
Cold, wet,
snow?
interesting with the lockdown at night. It's the situation in the Netherlands. I was never expecting to see it here with the riots about the lockdown, but where we live,
Yeah.
it's nice, peace, quiet, and it's going.
That's great. You're keeping safe.
Yeah, it's. I'm really pleased I'm not in one of the bigger cities.
Yeah, I can imagine. We've actually seen it on the Swedish news as well. It reached Sweden.
Yeah.
Yeah, so all the comments from 2 weeks ago in America with, wow, look at that, that's unbelievable. And yeah, our turn.
Here we are.
Never think
Yeah.
it can't happen to you.
Oh, true story. True story. On a more positive note, points for your TARDIS in the background.
Thank you. It's, I drew it in the wrong place. I drew it before I had my desk set up, so it really needs to be slightly lower and a little bit this way. But I've not had time to redraw it properly, so you miss out
Next
the light,
time.
unfortunately.
Well, maybe it's about to land or something.
Yeah, it's just fading in.
We're such nerds. We all love
and
it.
that's why it's fun.
Yeah.
So if you don't know what we're talking about Doctor Who. And I usually say there are two types of people. The people that like Doctor Who and the people that hasn't seen it yet.
Yes. No, I'm not going to argue with that one. It's people think that Lego is my biggest geek out, but to be fair, it's probably my second biggest. Doctor Who probably comes first.
So Lego Doctor Who is the ultimate geek out for you.
I have Lego Doctor Who.
I know you do. Of course you do.
Of course I do. Yeah, I have the TARDIS. I have Weeping Angels. I have Daleks. I think it's Clara, the 11th Doctor, and the 12th Doctor.
I don't know what you're talking
which
about
you have
at
a
all.
console that you can put in and out of.
Can someone mute Daniel because he doesn't know?
Everyone is welcome.
Yeah, that is true.
Now
That is
Daniel
true.
knows what he's supposed to watch after the Actually, you do have a half an hour now, so we can ask you afterwards.
Yeah, you might
But-
fit
but-
a half an
Doctor Who, I'm
episode.
not going to feel
But,
upset at you.
I think Stacy's session is more interesting. So I would say here and watch
Yeah.
that.
True.
Yeah.
And we have a comment. Tom Baker for the win.
I can go with that one.
Is he the best one, though?
I say it's kind of an issue here, certainly for Classic Who, because it's really age dependent. And I saw Tom Baker first because my brother watched it. But my first real Doctor was Peter Davison. So that's kind of my Doctor. And then from the new Who, probably Tennant. You can't get away from that hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
But
is
Tom
true.
Baker's still awesome. Would you like a jelly baby?
Better than fish sticks and custard.
Yes. Fish.
All right, we are on the 35 mark.
Yeah.
Stacy, take it away.
Okay, thank you. And well, hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Now, with the introduction of Blazor, as Jeff so amazingly said in the first session this afternoon, we have the ability as .NET developers to write single-page applications using the same technology on the client side as we have on the server side. If you're using server-side Blazor, it can run alongside your server-side code. but you can also use Client Side Blazor. The ability for you to run your app inside your browser via WASM. It's fantastic. On that first call, you download the .NET compiled or the WASM compiled .NET runtime and your code, and it all runs inside at the client's machine. And it's not Silverlight 2.0. And because the code runs on the client machine, we don't need that big, full-blown web server on the back end anymore. And today, we are going to be building a Blazor client-side application with an Azure function as an API, and we're going to deploying it to Azure without using an app service, without using a web app, and looking at some of the things that we can do with it. Now, to do that today, we're going to be looking at the static web apps currently in preview inside of Azure, and let's see how to get one set up. Hi, I'm Stacy Cashmore. I have been a software developer since the mid-1990s, and I'm a Microsoft MVP for developer technologies. And I've been playing with Blazor for a couple of months now, and I'm starting to get into it and really enjoy it. Now, if we're going to deploy our client-side app to a static website, there's a few things that we need to think about. We have some advantages of running it there and some things that, maybe not so much. Start with the advantages first. It's way more fun. First one, we have no server. We don't have to maintain it. We don't have the overhead of it. We don't have to think about it. Now, there's always at least one server in serverless, but the fun thing is we don't care. As well as that, if you're using a static web app, then inside of one single atomic Azure resource, you have your client-side application hosted statically, and you have your Azure function to work as your API. And it's all hooked together and it works, again, without you having to worry about it. It's one less thing that you have to think about. And finally, if we deploy this from inside the Azure portal to our GitHub, then we get a workflow set up for us. It is a workflow that does continuous deployment. So every time we do a push to our main branch, it gets fired. And it also helps us with our workflow to check that what we're pushing to production actually does what we want it to do. Of course, with advantages, there's also disadvantages. The first one, the biggest one, that wonderful word, preview. This is not in general availability yet. I would not recommend running this as a production thing. I would recommend playing with it and seeing what you can do. Secondly, at present, it's pretty much GitHub Actions only. That is, when you create it in the portal, it links to your GitHub account, it creates a workflow for you in GitHub, and that's where it runs. If you're on Azure DevOps, sorry, this might not be the technology for you today. But I was reading in the GitHub repo yesterday, I believe, that the work to have this running from Azure pipelines is pretty much complete, and hopefully we might get to see it next month. So keep them crossed. Then there's one more thing, which it's not a disadvantage, but it is something to bear in mind. In order to create this workflow inside your GitHub repo, you need to authorize your Azure portal to access your GitHub repo. Personally, I don't have an issue with this. I know what it's doing, but I do know people that won't do this on principle. And for them, again, right now, this is not the technology for them. One thing I would add to that is every time I add a new static web app, I always have to reauthorize the portal. So it's not just that you're giving carte blanche access to all of your repos. When it's creating the workflow, it needs to access it. It kind of makes sense, really. Right. That's probably enough of me talking. You came here to see some awesome stuff happening inside of a browser. So let's get on to that now. So what we're going to be creating today is, like I say, a WebAssembly Blazor application with a function API, get them to talk to each other. And then we're going to try and run it locally and then run it inside of Azure, see what we can do with it. So the first thing we need to do is create our app. So we are going to create a client app first. And come on, you can do it, little computer. And we're going to be creating really, you can do it, little computer. Anytime now, that would be good. There we go. So we're going to create a Blazor WebAssembly app, and we're going to call that client. I'm running it in GitHub because an amount of my demo kind of needs a specific place to run so that the right repo gets picked up. And we're going to call this Blazor Talk Demo because I cannot name things. I'm not going to run this in .NET 5. I'll explain later if I have time. I'm not going to do authentication. I am going to do HTTPS. I am not going to host it inside an ASP.NET Core application, of course, because we want this to run as a static site. And I'm ignoring the progressive web application because it's not what we're doing today. So let's create that. That should scaffold up for us. And it's always the same. When you do the run-throughs, this takes like 2 seconds. And now it doesn't. Wow, that's one unhappy machine. Come on, you can do it, little machine. Right, now we have our client. Let's add our API, and that is going to be a Azure function. We're going to call this API. And the client API name, I'll get back to those in a minute. You'll see why I picked those. And we want, of course, a HTTP trigger. So this should scaffold up, and now we have our 2 projects that will talk to each other, and we can get some data passed between them. But we also want to run this locally. So there's one more change we have to do before we start looking at code, and that is change the properties of our solution so that we can fire both of these up. So we're just going to set them both to be startup projects. Okay. And now we can start actually working on our code. Now we have our function here. And if anybody has tried a Blazor app and just scaffolded one up with a new project, you'll know that in our pages, we have this fetch data page. And this shows you how you can get data from a server inside of your Blazor application and put it on the screen. Wow, this is really not happy. I'm hoping we get through this. And that happens on line 42 down here. We get our data from the sample data site. What we're going to do is just replace this sample data with the Azure API. And to do that, I have a snippet that I'm going to copy over. And we're going to put that inside our pre-made function. We're just going to replace all of this. And this really is just returning an array of weather readings, which I've literally ripped out of the JSON file previously. Now, one last thing I want to do, just because I really hate having a file name with a different name to my class, I'm just going to rename this weather forecast. So now we have our root, our weather forecast, which will be available on API/weather forecast. We now need to use that from inside this fetch data page. And for that, the only thing we need to do is just change the location that we're looking into. So we're going to change that to API weather forecast. Now you notice here that I'm not having to tell it to go looking for the data anywhere special. It's just getting it from the same URL as the application itself. And that happens because inside that static Blazor app, there's proxying done for you. Again, you don't need to know about this. That allows you to access your function API on the same URL as your client app. We don't have that ability locally. Our machines run in a different way, so we need to set something up. First thing we need to do is let the client app know that if we're running in development mode, you've got to go to a different port number where the Azure function is running. And the second thing is, it is a different port number. We have to turn on cores because it is a cross-origin request. So first of all, we are going to let the client know where it can get the data from. And with any luck, my machine might have calmed down a little bit now. And we're going to create a new JSON file inside of our www root. So we're going to add a new item. We are going to search for JSON. And we're going to call that app-settings.development. So what we're going to use when we're in development mode. And I just have one setting, which I'm going to copy in there. And that is this API prefix pointing to localhost 7071, because that's where our Azure function is going to run. But right now, we're not doing anything with this setting, so we need to change one more line of code. And that would be line 20 in our program CS. When we new up the HTTP client for our dependency injection, by default, we build the URI from the base address of the host environment. But like I say, we don't want that when we're running in development mode. So we're just going to add an extra piece of text here, just to say, from the builder configuration, get my API prefix. And if that doesn't exist, go to the hosted environment base address. Now what we need to do is make the function actually accept these requests that we're going to send. So let's do that one now. And for that, we're going to create a new file inside of our function, and we're going to create that in the properties folder. And that is again going to be a JSON file. And this one's going to be called launch settings. What do we want to do when we launch this from inside of Visual Studio? And we just have an object that we need to bring in here. We want to start it with a command line that just says, allow everything on course. When it's running on my machine, I don't care. And if everything's gone right, and if my machine does what it's supposed to do, we should now download the NuGet packages. The storage emulator should start in order to host my local Azure function, assuming it compiles. Fingers crossed. There's a storage emulator. Okay. Next step, we should get our Azure function app to host our local function. And finally, we should, in theory, get a browser opening up so that I can show you this running locally, our local workflow. And for this, I just want to show you the network traffic that's going on. You can see we download all of these files to begin with. That first hit is a big hit when you're running Client Side Blazor. And then it loads our actual application. Now, I want to clear this. And if we go to fetch data and everything's gone right, my data loads. And if we check on network traffic, we can see it's coming from localhost 7071. It's picking up my new setting. So now we have an app. It runs locally. We can debug it. We can check what's going on before we push it up to GitHub and deploy it to Azure. That's our next step. So the first thing we need to do is push our changes up to GitHub. Add app. We're going to commit everything and push, make sure it all goes up. Drum roll, please. There we go. Phew. That's one thing that went right. And now if I have a look in my GitHub repo, we can see the API and the client. So we have our code, let's deploy it. And for that, we're going to go to our Azure portal. And I've made a resource group already for this demonstration. And we're going to add a new static web app inside of here. So we'll search for the static web app in preview. Let's create that one. Check the subscription and resource group, give it a name. This is our demo Blazor app. And we want to run this in West Europe because I'm in the Netherlands. Sign in with GitHub, that bit that I say some people really don't like doing. And I now have access to my organizations, which I don't have, it's just my account. The repo I want to use, which is that Blazor Talk demo, and the branch I want to use, which is main. Then we get to pick our build preset. We've got lots to choose from, but we're going for Blazor, of course. And here you set your app location, your API location, and your output location. And this is defaulted to that client API. Not only does it tell you what it is inside your solution, it makes this step even easier. The output location, as far as I know, you can put that wherever you want to put it, but it has to be a location that doesn't exist in your repo by default, because this is where it publishes the files to. So let's review and create that. Now, if this goes well, which, let's face it, it's going well so far, we should have a web app created for us inside of a couple of seconds. This generally doesn't take too long to do. There we go. That's one good thing. We have a URL available to us, and we have Calm Bay, which is good because I need to be calm right now. The names that come up here, fantastic. I love them. There's all sorts of different ones. Yellow River, Orange Hill. Let's go to our Calm Bay. And we get a simple web page that says, your Azure Static app is live and waiting for your content. So let's see how that content gets there. For that, we need to go back into our repo. If I refresh my page, you can now see that we have this GitHub workflows folder that's been created by the Azure portal for us. And we have our deploy YAML file for our static web app. And every time we push our main branch, we run this build and deploy job. It checks out our code, and then using this Azure Static Web App's deploy task with a secret to give it access to our Azure account, which is set up by the Azure portal for you as well, it does an upload action. And at this point, I wish I knew the magic one layer lower than the metal I'm using, because I'd love to know how this is set up on the back end. The three locations we had, our app, our API, and our output location, they are all in the workflow file as well. So if you should ever reorganize your work in the future, or if you do it wrong when you're setting it up from the portal, it's not the end of the world. You can always change this later and improve it. Now, if we're looking at actions, we should see that we have a workflow which was kicked off 2 minutes ago, and it's probably going to take another couple of minutes to finish. And seeing as we're short on time, especially with the issues I've had, I'm just going to carry on with the next bit of my demo. We'll come back to this one in a second. Now, what I want to go over with you is the workflow that we have when changing our code, because obviously we want to know our code works before we push it to production. We've seen we can run it locally, but my local machine, that's not the same as running it inside of Azure. Thankfully, out of the box, we also get a deploy workflow available to us. If we go to our GitHub workflows, we can also see that we have a pull request trigger for open, synchronized, reopened, and closed. And as long as the action isn't closed, we still trigger off this build and deploy again. We get our pull request branch, we build it, we deploy it. And if we have a look in our pull request file, we have a message from the GitHub Actions bot that says, hey, you have a stage site available to you. So if we open this, we get my application, still the boring scaffolded application. And if I go to fetch data, the change that I made was actually changing a little bit of text right here. It was a little bit of dry text which told you exactly what the page did, but it's a little bit boring. And well, I know it's snowing in Sweden, and it was snowing when I wrote this. So, oh, the weather outside is frightful. Now we can check our app works in an Azure environment. And if it does, approve our pull request and get it deployed to production. And just to prove that this is different to my production, if we come down to the URL and we remove the stage part of the URL, that would be this -1 because it's pull request number 1, and the West Europe where it's hosted, I should get, in theory, this very boring, this component demonstrates fetching data from the server. So we can compare our two scenarios, make sure we're doing the right thing. Now, whilst I was showing that, my deploy is complete. Yes. Oh no, that's a different deploy. This deploy is still complete. Good. I can show you the static web app working for us. So let's load it up, refresh it, and there's our application. Inside of 20 minutes, we are from nothing to having a deployed application running inside of Azure. And we've even seen the workflow that we have in order to make sure we can update it safely. We're finished. Not quite. There's two things I don't like about this. The first one is this Calm Bay. It's a very nice URL, but you don't want to give that to your users. So I want to change this to something that I can more easily remember and I'm happy to share with people. And the other one is, we have two routes here. We have our counter route and we have our fetch data route. These don't exist on the server. They only exist inside the browser because it's a client-side application, which means if I refresh this page, we get a 404 error. Let's fix that. Now, the first time I did this, before I looked into it properly, I set up an Azure function with a hideously complex set of proxies that took care of all of this for me. It worked, and I was reasonably proud of it. It's also completely the wrong thing to do. The right way to do it is to use the routes.json that you can put into your Blazor application. So we're going to add that one now. So we're going to bring it across from here. It again is in our www route because this is what gets deployed when you publish. We want a new item. We still want this to be JSON. And we're going to call that, like I say, routes.json. And this is a file where you can set up all of your different routes for Blazor so. I'm just going to totally cheat. I'm just going to use one route and it's a fallback route. If you can't find what you're looking for, just redirect to index.html, give me a status code 200 because I don't want a 404, and then let the client app deal with it from that point on. Now, I would love to show you this working on my local machine, but I can't because Visual Studio hides this problem from you. So I've just got to upload this to GitHub, and let my workflow fire again. So we'll add our routes here. We will commit all and push, and it's going to complain at me. Come on, complain so I can do the right thing. There we go. Complain louder. We're going to first do a pull because we changed our repository when we added the workflow, and now we're going to push. And hopefully this one's actually going to work. In the meantime, I'm assuming that's going to work, and we can go back to our site and we can check that hopefully we have another action fired off. There we go. Again, this is going to take a few minutes to deploy. So whilst that's deploying, let's deal with the last issue, this Calm Bay. I want to add a custom domain to this. And for this one, I'm going to go to one of my pre-made environments. So let's go to my resource group and let's go to my static site PR. And it needs to be this one because this one takes about 2 days worth of setup. I'm going to very quickly set up a custom domain here because it also takes a couple of minutes to run through, and I'm starting to run down on time a little bit. So I'm just going to add a custom domain quickly, and then I'll walk through the steps more slowly for you. So the custom domain I'm going to add here is www.stacyclouds.com. And if we validate this, we can add it. Scary thing when I was trying to do this before, my DNS provider was in the middle of a DDoS attack, and all of a sudden I couldn't validate anything. I lost all of my websites. And while that's deploying, let's go through it a little more slowly in our newly created app. We have our customs domain. We have a page which I think is really confusing because it says custom domains. Looks like it has a nice list you can add to this, and you can't. You can only add one right now. And when you add that one, the first thing that you have to do is update your DNS record. You need to add a CNAME record pointing to the www or at the www of your custom domain. And you need to give it the value of the URI of your static web app. This can take about 48 hours before it propagates through the network. So this is why you need to do a little bit of pre-setup. After you've waited long enough and you're pretty sure it's available, you can then check it here. And if you've not done it right, you're going to get an error message. Your CNAME record is invalid. Please check it, try again, wait another 2 days. there's another issue that you might have, and that is if you already have a custom domain on your, or if you already have a website on your custom domain, you're going to get an invalid request come back, and it's going to tell you this domain is linked to another site. Assuming you've done everything right, this will deploy for you, as I've just done from my other static web app. Now, there's two issues here. www. We have no root domain control in our custom domains. You can only go to www right now. This means that www.stacyclouds.com in a second will point to our new application. stacyclouds.com will point to my parking page by my DNS provider. And there's no easy way at present to do this inside your static web app. The other one is I have my domain, stacyclouds.com, and that's my main website, but I just want to deploy an application on a subdomain. I can't do that here either because it has to be on www. Now, both of these can be a little bit of a showstopper when you're using a static web app. We are in preview at the moment. I hope that by the time it gets into general availability, the team at Azure get this working so that we can use it properly. Now, my custom domain is failing, so I can't show you my custom domain. Oh, that's such a shame. It's apparently I didn't do enough to please the demo gods today either. It's just solidarity with Nico. In theory, in all of my run-throughs for this works, and I can now show you my domain working. It looks like I'm not going to be able to do that today, I'm afraid. What I can show you is that this merge branch has succeeded. It's deployed. And if I go back to my static web app on fetch data and refresh, I now get my weather forecast as we expect it to be. I can't believe that custom domain didn't work. I've got 2 minutes left. I'm going to try and do this one more time while I finish off my talk and just see if it works. Because this is annoying. So we're going to add www.stacyclouds.com, validate it, kick it off. I should never have told you that the DNS provider died last week. It's I cursed myself. Now, let's hope this one works this time. That's about it for me. And in the last 28 minutes, we have, just to recap, created that client-side Blazor application. We've added the Azure function. We've set it up so that we can debug it locally. We have deployed it into Azure, into a production-like environment. We have looked at how we can get the workflows working for the pull requests to make sure that things work in production, not just on my machine, before we push it out there to our users. We've added our routes so that we can deep link and our users can hit F5 without things breaking on us. And we failed to add a custom domain. If you feel like giving this a go yourself, then I have a link for you. And that link will hopefully also be inside of Twitter right now, or you can use this QR code on the screen and it would take you there. It's the MS Learn page where you can try this out yourself, see what you think to it, build a simple one, and then make it awesome. One last thing, has it worked? Has it deployed my custom domain? It hasn't, and I'm out of time, so I'm terribly sorry. Well, aside from that, I've had fun today doing this for you. I hope you've enjoyed the conference so far, and I hope you enjoy the rest of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And as we said to Nico, thank you for sharing the responsibility and taking one for the demagogues.
I couldn't leave him on his own now, could I?
No. That's what you do for friends.
Yeah, that's what you do for friends. I'm going to try and get that working this afternoon, and I'm still going to share the link on Twitter before I kill it this evening. I want to prove that this works.
I'm really sure that this session was better than the series I don't remember the name on now that we talked about earlier. But this was great.
Doctor Who?
Doctor Who,
Oh,
yeah.
Doctor Who.
This was
yeah.
better.
I think
Doctor
that's 10
Who!
points for
Okay.
Stacy.
No, I will never forget that again.
There we go.
I know what we need to send to Daniel.
Yeah. So we do have a couple of questions, or actually this is more like a comment. You can run almost for free on Azure in Azure Storage.
You can indeed. I also run a couple of apps that way myself. It's also really simple to set up. But the advantage you get from running it inside of the static web app is you get that Azure functions linked to your app out of the box, and it's in one atomic component. It's a little bit easier to maintain. It's a little bit... The barrier to entry is a little bit lower for trying stuff out.
So what about pre-rendering WebAssembly? How do people host that?
You know what? I was reading about this last night, and I skimmed it, and it's on my list for over the weekend. I will see if I can find that blog post, and I'll share it on Twitter, because right now, what I've seen people do, they pre-render it the same way they pre-render a Blazor side application, and then they just literally store all of that HTML on the site and serve it that way. That is as the Dutch say, kort door de bocht. The short version, it's more complex than that, but it's. I'll share the web post which explains it way better than I can do, reading about it for a couple of minutes at 10 o'clock at night.
What about using Azure AD business to customer in Azure Static Web Apps? Can you do that?
I honestly do not know. It's I've not set up authentication in this yet. I can't imagine why you couldn't. But I honestly don't know. I'm going to look into this, and I'll put that answer in Twitter too.
If you can use the regular Azure AD, you can also use B2C. It's mostly the same client libraries. But I'm not sure about that in Awesome, but it's the same for regular.
Yeah.
So the default implementation when you do when you add authentication to a WebAssembly app is that it's going to use the server side for the authentication. So that would need a server app. But I'm not sure if you would what would happen if you're doing just a WebAssembly app and not having a backend. So.
I am going to have a look at this, and I am going to answer that one on Twitter. It won't be today, but I'm going to have a look at that one and see what I can get set up.
Great presentation, Stacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David.
So what about static web apps in production environments?
I say you can do it. It's there. It's available. I just wouldn't run anything which is in preview in production. It's I'm a little bit risk averse to that. It's a risk that you have to decide whether or not it's worth taking.
Jimmy's the other way around. They were running Blazor in production when it was in preview. Wouldn't recommend it.
So my boss once said it's better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. And if my boss says that is what I'm going to use.
Absolutely.
We got a lot of comments. Great presentation. This was elegant. Thank you. And someone apparently sneezed.
Kort door de bocht. Absolutely.
That sounds like Klingon.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, to my untrained ears, that is. Didn't mean to offend anyone.
So you've been playing around with Blazor a little bit. What do you think about it?
I love it. It's what I've done with it so far. I really like it. I've just started to, because I've been meaning to write my own website for a while, but it never really had the. I'm going to say time, but that's a lie to get started. But I started it this week. I think it's stacyclouds.net is the one that I'm going to use for my actual site. And using it with this whole client-side static web app, it's just really easy to get started. And you can make it do a lot of really cool stuff without putting a huge amount of work into it. It's who knows? Once I actually get into the real side of building my own site and making it really complex, I might have different feelings. But right now, for getting started, it's a really low barrier for entry.
That's always welcomed.
Yeah. So what is the difference between static web apps and a static website on a storage account?
I don't know about the serving side of it, what's different. But yeah, the biggest thing is it is just an atomic resource. You don't need to worry about how your data is stored. You don't need to worry about wiring up to your APIs. As long as your API is inside your function app, it's all done for you. You have a lot less control. I don't know if that's going to change once it comes out of preview, but you have a lot less control right now if you run it as a static web app. I'm curious when it goes into general availability what they do to really make this, if it's going to be enterprise ready, or if it's just going to be kind of like what I'm using it for my website and just a smaller function. It's with the amount of control you have over who can access it, how you can access other resources. It's not suitable for that kind of thing right now. You can't put a VNet around it and limit its access to lots of things. It's just, it is there. It is available for the world to see. Enjoy. That also goes with the workflow. So when you deploy to a stage environment, it even says in the documentation, make sure you are not exposing sensitive data here. This is on the net. So your staging environment is also there for the world to see. So it's on that side, yeah, at present in its preview form, it's certainly not enterprise ready. But if I was making a website, if I was making small, simple websites for companies, it's phenomenal. I love it. It's easy. It's low maintenance. It's perfect.
Nice. So apparently Stacy Clouds/fetch data is working.
Yes!
There you go.
Awesome. My custom domain worked. Thank you very much, Yellow Kyber. It's, there you go. It took a bit longer than it should have done, but at least it's there.
We got there.
We got there.
So we don't have a lot of more questions. If you have any questions, please write them in the chat. So while we wait for the next speaker, actually, he was just in here. What was your latest Lego build?
My latest Lego build, I'm kind of halfway through 2 right now. One is the Nintendo Entertainment System, which is phenomenal. It's about the right size. It has a controller that you can plug in and unplug. It comes with Mario Brothers cartridge, which you can slot in and push down as the original.
Do you need to blow it? Blow on it.
You can blow on it if you wish.
And for the youngins in the audience, that's how you made them work back in the day.
That's what we had to do to make games work in the past.
Yeah.
It's also got a couple of really cool things with it. One side pops off, and there's a Mario Brothers diorama inside the build, which is really cool to look at.
Nice.
And it comes with a TV, which is what we're currently building. And it's got a mechanical handle on the side. You turn it round. And it's an 8-bit Mario game. And Mario even jumps over the obstacles. And the Lego Mario game that you can get with the Mario with the LCD chest, if you put him on top of the TV screen, he even reacts to each of the things that the Mario in the Lego TV does. I love that set. It's awesome.
Lego has become so much more than it was when I was a child.
Yeah.
Super
and
cool.
My other set that I'm building is a Saturn V. I've almost finished with stage 1 of that.
That one is huge, isn't it?
Build.
Yeah.
It's I think stage 1 is about yay big. So it's going to be quite a high little rocket when it's done.
Nice.
Nice.
Thank you so much, Stacy.